The village in it with a map and a plan. No place too tidy for this determined man. Crossing the counties one by one, you'll see in every English corner a bit of history.
Hello folks, welcome back to South Cambridgeshire once again. I know it's been a little while, but you know what, it's becoming a little bit of a tradition to come to Cambridgeshire just before Christmas, isn't it? And I'm here again. I'm only covering two this time here in South Cambridgeshire. We're going to a pair of twins, and this is the first one. It's got lots to talk about, including a mill and a former RAF base. This is Steeple Morden. Steeple Morden, Steeple on Moor Hill. This weekend we're back in Cambridgeshire. It's becoming something of a tradition to be in this county just before Christmas, isn't it? This year I've only got two for you. It's a set of twins right on the border with Hertfordshire. These are the Mordens, Steeple and Gilden, and we're kicking off with the former. The parish of Steeple Morden lies 14 miles southwest of Cambridge. It's quite a lengthy strip of land. It stretches for some 6 miles from the River Cam, which forms its northern boundary, to the Icknield Way, or A505 in the south. It's also quite narrow, with its widest point only 2 miles. At its narrowest, it's just 710 yards. To the west, its boundary with Gilden Morden follows the West Brook, so named by the 13th century. In the east, the boundary is defined by old watercourses and ancient fieldways. The name Morden literally means Moor Hill. Steeple is a reference to an actual steeple, but not the one on the current church. We'll explain why in our main walk. It was also known as South Morden in the early 13th century. By far and away, the most well-known landmark in Steeple Morden is the former airfield. RAF Steeple Morden opened in 1938 and began life as a satellite airbase for RAF Bassingbourn. It was later used by the US Air Force. The site of the airfield has now been returned to agricultural use, although the concrete taxiways and runways still remain. And because they do, that's the perfect excuse to have a look. Let's go. We start in the hamlet of Odsy, which is just within the parish boundaries, right at the southern tip. It lies close to the Hertfordshire border too, just off the A505, roughly equidistant between Royston and Baldock. Odsy is the location of Ashwell and Morden railway station. The railways reached the parish in the mid-19th century, crossing the southernmost end. Ashwell and Morden on the Hitchin to Royston Railway opened in 1850 and has remained open ever since. Originally it was just known as Ashwell, but the name was changed to Ashwell and Morden in 1920, 3 years before the Great Northern Railway amalgamated with several others to form what we know today as LNER. Off-peak, all services at Ashwell and Morden are operated by Thameslink. From this station you can reach Brighton via London Bridge and Gatwick Airport to the south, and Cambridge to the north. Despite its modest size, the hamlet of Odsy has a lot to speak of. For one, there's a Grade 2 listed war memorial to those from the local area killed in both World War I and World War II. It's a stone of remembrance thought to be designed by Sir Edward Lutyens, and it was paid for by Sir George Fordham. Part of Odsy sits within Gilden Morden, Steeple Morden's neighbour. Within that part of the hamlet lie Odsy House and its neighbour Odsy Grange. Together they form part of a group of listed buildings. Odsy House was built for William Cavendish, the 2nd Duke of Devonshire, in the early 18th century. It was designed as a lodge for the Odsy horse races. A wall with outbuildings connects its kitchen building to an earlier stable block, that of Odsy Grange. The Grange dates from 1705 and was originally the jockey house. Its coach house and stable range complete the former racing establishment. The Odsy estate was sold by the Cavendish family to the Fordham brothers in 1793. Now we're in Steeple Morden, but before we do our main walk, we've got two landmarks to talk about that are further afield. This is Saunderson's Mill, but it's alternatively known as Barker's Mill or the Town Mill too. The story of this mill, which stands on Ashwell Road, is entwined with the lives of two families, the Barkers and the Saundersons. It was built in 1816 by Thomas Barker, whose descendants sold it to the Saunderson family in 1869. It stands on a piece of land which originally laid in a large open field which was owned by the church. That was until the Enclosure Act granted the land to Thomas Goodchild in 1808. Goodchild, having been allotted his land, sold the western end to Thomas Barker. This three-storey wooden smock windmill on a brick base is easily one of the best that survives in the UK today. It's been variously powered. Wind was the main power in 1883, steam was first introduced in 1888, and some records even say water was involved. Those are clearly wrong though, because there's no water out here. It lost its sails in the 1920s, and by 1958 it was said to be powered by electricity. It continued operating, although on a reduced scale, into the late 1960s and early 1970s. Since 1975 it's been a private house owned by the Haslers. They ran a packaging business from the premises for many years until most of the land was sold for redevelopment in 2006. The other major landmark not on the main walk is Steeple Morden's best known, the former RAF base. Between 1940 and 1942, Steeple Morden was a grass satellite dispersal airfield used by Bomber Command's No. 11 Operational Training Unit. They flew Wellington bombers, primarily from RAF Bassingbourn. It was later turned over to the Americans and designated as USAAF Station 122. Hard surface runways were laid down, along with concrete hard stands and a permanent T2 hangar. Although not planned for use until 1943, Steeple Morden was first used by the US Air Force in October 1942, when their 3D photographic reconnaissance group arrived from RAF Membry. The relevant squadrons only stayed at the airfield until the 10th of December, departing for Lasania, Algeria as part of Operation Torch. During their time at Steeple Morden, Lieutenant Colonel Elliot Roosevelt, the son of the former American President Franklin D., served as commander and flew an F-4 Lightning. With the departure of the Photo Recon squadrons, the 355th Fighter Group arrived from Philadelphia Municipal Airport in 1943. Their first combat mission was a fighter sweep over Belgium on the 14th of September that year. They then served primarily as escorts for the Flying Fortress and Liberator bombers that attacked industrial areas of Berlin, marshalling yards at Karlsruhe, oil refineries at Misburg, and other German targets. The group flew its last mission on the 25th of April, 1945. With the departure of the Americans, Steeple Morden was transferred to RAF Fighter Command and closed down. By 1960 it was largely returned to agriculture. Now, the former airfield is virtually unrecognisable, barring a few buildings, some remnants of the perimeter track, and of course, the runways. Okay, now it's time to go into the main village itself and have a wander around. In the church here in Steeple Morden, there's a memorial window which also makes a reference to Steeple Morden, the RAF base that was formerly here. So let's go and find that and see what else this village has got for us. Our main walk starts at the recreation ground which adjoins Hay Street in the centre of the village. Known simply as the Rec or the Park, it's owned by Steeple Morden Parish Council. It was created in 1895 and it was originally just 4 acres big. It's since been extended a few times. It now has 2 football pitches, a cricket pitch, a bowls green, 3 hard tennis courts and a children's play area. In itself it's not greatly special, but behind the recreation ground to the west is the village's conservation area. This has plenty of native trees and wild flowers which dip down towards Westbrook and the White Ponds. Well, it's November the 1st today, and that means in 4 days' time it's bonfire night. And here in Steeple Morden it looks like they've already got one prepared. That's going to be a blaze, I'm sure, in a couple of nights' time. The village hall is also part of the recreation ground. I couldn't find much about this, but I do know that this is not the original hall. There was a much older structure that predated this, and if you look in the links below, you'll find a picture of it, dating from the 1950s. It's become quite normal for me now every time I hit Cambridgeshire to see thatched cottages. That one there is an absolute beauty, and it stands almost opposite Steeple Morden's primary school, which is next on our list. Steeple Morden Primary School's history goes back to 1867, when a Church of England day school was established in the village. The vicar of the parish at that time was William Martin, and it was he who opened it with financial support from the government, New College, Cambridge and Lord Hardwicke. The school initially had a house for the master or mistress and one classroom. By 1872, Martin's school had gained a second classroom, and in 1890 it was attracting evening classes for the likes of drawing, history and commercial arithmetic. In 1960 it was expanded after the County Council acquired some land behind the school, and they did the same again in 2009. It now caters for around 160 pupils who are split across 7 classes, 1 in each year group. Next we come to the War Memorial, which sits on a polygonal base. It has a plinth, a tapering shaft and a cross. It only memorialises those lost in World War I, a total of 15 men. It stands close to St Peter and St Paul's Church, and that's next. Now, considering we're in Steeple Morden, you'd have thought the church would be the reason for the village's name. It kind of is, but at the same time it isn't, and here's why. A Christian church has been present in Steeple Morden since Saxon times. It may even have been a minster church that influenced other nearby parishes. In the 13th century it was rebuilt, and it was that building that gave the village its name. Steeple Morden was chosen to distinguish it from Gildon Morden. The church likely had a central tower, a chancel and an aisled nave. However, the steeple no longer exists. In 1625 it fell down, damaging the nave and destroying the chancel. The nave was repaired, but the chancel was never rebuilt. It would take until the 1860s for the church to have a chancel again. Virtually the whole building was reconstructed, although some of the nave arcades from the 13th century still remain. So although there is a spire here, it's not the one that's responsible for the name Steeple Morden. Like the majority of the current building it sits upon, it was built in the 19th century. Okay, the church is open, so I've stepped in for a look around. Hats come off, as always, mark of respect, as always. So, let's have a quick look. These walls are quite bare. That's the first thing I've noticed, and it's quite light in here as well because there's a distinct lack of stained glass. There's the chancel. As you can see, there's only a little tiny bit of stained glass in there. Lovely red carpet though. The natural light done half bring out the nice colour of that deep red. That's fantastic, isn't it? It reminds me of strawberry fields. It's the colour of strawberries, isn't it? Or maybe even poppies, which is ideal for the time of year. Let's have a look around on the other walls. There's a tablet up there, but there's no way I'm going to be able to read that because it's in the corner and it's way too dark. But yeah, there's some pictures on the wall here. One there, one there. Let's go to the back. There is a plaque under this window. So let's see. This is in memory of Christopher Maddox Fordham of Odsy, for 12 years a church warden of this parish. Now the name Fordham is quite important in this part of East Anglia, east of England. You'll see why in a future couple of episodes, which are going to be out on your screens very soon. Another window at the back. That's the one we saw from the outside a moment ago. Now, most of the things that are on the walls in this church tend to be in this corner here, where there's a microwave. Would you believe there's a microwave just there? Got a list of incumbents there. That's way too small to read. And this one, I can only just about make it out. The top panel, I've got no chance. The one below says Susanna Grindale, wife of Solomon Grindale, who departed this life in some year. I can't tell because it's all in Roman numerals. Very difficult to read tablets when they're high up like that. So, never mind. This font there with its almost conical top. And the first thing I noticed when I came into the church a moment ago is the fact that it's got some postcards. There we go. You can take yourself a look at that. There is Steeple Morden's church on a brilliant, bright, sunny day, apparently. And that forms a postcard, which you can buy here inside the church. So if you're ever in here and you fancy buying one of those, you can. Time for us to depart this church and head towards the pub, which is just over the road. The village pub is the Waggon and Horses, a traditional 17th century building that sits across from the church. Its site began life as a small farmstead in the centre of the village, which by the 19th century had developed into a mini housing estate with some 10 dwellings. A man named Abraham Pearmain was the owner of the property in 1854. Frederick Archdale purchased the pub in 1878 from Pearmain's son, John. Archdale was a partner in the brewing company Wells & Co., which later became Wells & Winch. In turn, they were acquired by Green King in 1961. Hawthorne Leisure purchased the pub from Green King in 2014, and today it's owned by Admiral Taverns, who acquired Hawthorne Leisure in 2021. Like many other pubs countrywide, the Waggon and Horses suffered greatly thanks to the COVID pandemic. At the beginning of August this year, the pub closed, although it did reopen on a restricted basis for limited days for a while, but its future remains unclear. Now, next to the pub there's a hole in the ground which is marked by a sign. That sign tells us that this is a well, and legend has it that when the steeple collapsed from the old church, it punctured a hole in the ground. The resulting well was used to supply the village's water until piped water came along. Let's talk a bit about the post office, which has only recently closed down. As of January the 31st, 2023, Steeple Morden has been without a post office for the first time in 175 years. It's had several locations around the village. The first was number 42 Hay Street, which was purpose-built in 1842 for the grocer Thomas Strickland. It was described as a post office in 1853, but became an official sub-post office in 1873. 22 Cheney Street is where it would go next. That's a house, built in 1780, which was extended and doubled in size in the 1850s. Today, it's now known as the Old Post Office. In 1986, it moved again, this time to Prothero's Garage at 18 Cheney Street. It didn't go far. At first, it was located in an old shop at the end of the house until moving a few yards to a purpose-built shop on the side of the garage in June 2000. And there it stayed, despite the threat of closure for many years. The only reason it's now closed permanently is because the last postmistress retired early after serving the village for over 36 years. That's the longest period that anybody has ever run the post office in Steeple Morden. Okay, via that footpath, I've returned to Craft Way, where I began this walk about 45 minutes ago. You're never short of a public right-of-way in either of the Morden twins, actually, because they're all over the place. You've got plenty that you can explore. Now, we're going to head towards the other of the two Morden twins next, but before we do, there's also a little area of Steeple Morden that we've yet to cover. It's called North Brook End, and to do that, we need to hop in the car. Finally, we've got a separate area of the village to cover using the car. This is North Brook End, which will link us to Steeple Morden's twin, Gildon Morden. North Brook End has one piece of history that's worth discussing, and that's its connections with Cambridge University. Jesus College owned a farm of about 165 acres in Steeple Morden. It had two farmhouses, one at Flex Lane and the other here at North Brook End. The estate was historically let on long leases to the Gatwood family and their descendants. The college sold its freehold in the estate in 1920, and the majority was bought by an FWP Hunt. The farmhouse at North Brook End continued for a while as accommodation for Hunt's workers, but was eventually demolished. The site is still visible in the field on the western side of North Brook End, just before another farmhouse. That was part of the Wimpole estate and is now a private residence. And that's it, everyone. One Morden down and one to go. I'll see you for the other one tomorrow. Now, just before I go, remember, this video is part of a huge project to visit every civil parish in England. That's more than 10,000. These routes are pre-planned, and due to time constraints, I can't cover every detail or walk down every street. Please don't complain if this video missed something out. I pronounce names how I choose to. I am very aware that local dialect may vary, and I don't take kindly to criticism about this. You've been warned. It's impossible to know everything too. If this video was terrible, make your own. If you're a regular watcher of The Village Idiot, you're not the only one. If you've got a small business, why not use my videos to advertise it? Leave a comment below if you're interested. And finally, thanks for watching this episode, everybody. Give us a like and a subscribe if you've enjoyed this episode, and share it with your friends and relatives. It all helps to keep this mission going. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as The Village Idiot, and I'm out.